Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotions, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We are a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. It is Friday, June 28th, 2024, at least in some countries, and you are welcomed to episode 20B. Yes, it's another B episode, and you know what that means. It's a special one. Trish, what are we doing tonight?
So we've spent a lot of time discussing wrestling media and potentially a lot of time our frustrations with it. But if we are going to discuss this subject, we probably need to talk to someone who actually works with it in our day-to-day. And I couldn't think of anyone better to do this with. And after some bullying, just a little, we've managed to get Bryan Alvarez to agree to speak to us today. So welcome, Bryan.
Have you seen my Twitter? You guys aren't even in the same universe as the bullying I get on a daily basis.
I don't know. You should wait till we're done before you say that.
Oh, that's true. I guess I should wait. I doubt it could be worse.
I don't know.
That's very true.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, it's obviously we're both long-time observer subscribers, listeners, and we really appreciate your time. For those that don't know, and you probably have to be living under a rock or on a mountain to do so, Bryan is the host of, let's see if I can get all these in one go. Probably won't.
Good luck.
Thank you. So the Bryan and Vinny Show, Figure 4 Daily. I'm going to do this completely wrong. Wrestling Observer with Radio with Dave Meltzer. And have I missed any, Bryan? I'm probably
Wrestling Observer Live with Mike.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Filthy 4 with Filthy Tom.
See, I knew I was going to mess it up.
I think that's it.
That's okay. So we're just going to get right into it. And the whole idea of this is to have more of a discussion around kind of wrestling media and the role of it and the future of it, rather than kind of just talking within our own echo chamber. So, Sarah, let's begin.
Cool. So I think the easiest way to kind of kick this off, Bryan, is because, we talk about dudes and dude podcasters a lot on our show. And so we finally have a dude podcaster to talk to, which we're pretty excited about. And I feel like you could also be described as like the dude podcaster, like the original one. I guess my question for you is, when you first started with Figure 4 and Figure 4 Online, and then when you joined up with Dave and the Wrestling Observer, did you have like an idea as to what you wanted to do? Was it like a proactive vision on your part?
Well, I mean, what I always wanted to do was radio. Well, I shouldn't say just radio, but I when I was young, I loved writing, and I just thought I'm going to grow up and be a writer. And that was like my main goal when I was a kid. And then, when I was a teenager, I started watching wrestling. Started watching WWF, and I loved it. And, there's a kind of thing where a lot of the stuff that I'm interested in, I want to do it. So, I really wanted to become a wrestler, and there was no avenues back then, really. I mean, you couldn't just, nowadays, you can go to any wrestling school anywhere. And it was much more difficult in, 1993, I guess it would have been. Actually, even earlier than that. But so, we did our backyard wrestling. And I did that for many years. And I've told the story many times, but we ran shows in a gymnastics facility. And we had a financial backer. And he had a lot of money, and he thought this had a lot of potential. And so he would finance a lot of things. And one of the things he financed was a paper newsletter about our promotion, the Youth Wrestling Federation. And so he paid to have these things printed and sent out to people that were interested for free. And long story short, we had to stop doing our promotion for insurance reasons. And I still had this mailing list. And I just graduated high school. And, I was thinking, what am I going to do with my life? My dad ran a business. I'd worked, a lot of different places. But, I really wanted my own business. And so I thought, well, I love writing, so I could be a writer. Maybe I could find a way to monetize, all of this stuff that I love. And so I came up with this idea of Figure 4 Weekly. And this was 1995. And at that point, I don't think I'd ever heard of The Observer. I'd never heard of The Torch. I only knew PWI Weekly. And PWI Weekly was like a 4-page newsletter. And like 2 pages were news, and the entire inside were all these results from around the world. I was like, God, I don't care about results. Like, it should just be 4 pages of news. And so I thought, you know what? I could do this. I could do this better. And so I started Figure 4 Weekly. And I had no idea what I was doing. I went to the library. I bought a bunch of business books. I bought a bunch of books about journalism. And I just like read all these books to try to figure out what I was doing. And around that same time, I was also listening to Art Bell, his radio program. Absolutely loved it. And so, like usual, I love it. I want to do it. But there was no avenue for that. And so in 1999, it's actually 98, I talked to Dave. I faxed him. I was too scared to call. And I said, hey, you've got an opening on the Observer hotline. By then, I'd been reading the Observer for a few years. And I had my own hotline that I had done that failed. And so I said, you've got an opening here. Could I be on the hotline? And he goes, yeah. And so I started doing his 900 line a couple days a week. And so when IATA started, he did the first IATA show, which was over the air, it was on the internet. For those of you that don't know IATA, it was Bob Meyerowitz started it. They had offices in New York City. They spent like $30 million. Nobody had the capacity to listen to these shows. So they enlisted him. He did like one show by himself for 2 hours. And he goes, man, I need a co-host. Which, if you know Dave, is funny because he could have easily done that for 2 hours by himself. But anyway, he asked me, and I was like, my God. So I can write about wrestling. I can be a wrestler, which is what I was doing also at the time. And I could do a radio show. It was like the greatest thing that could possibly happen to me. So I started doing IATA with him, and really the rest is history. We've been together in one way or another ever since. But yeah, I was always interested in those things: wrestling, writing, and radio. And I managed to do all of them.
Do you see yourself as a journalist?
I mean, I guess it's when people ask me, what do you do that don't know me? It always makes me feel uncomfortable because I don't know what I'm supposed to say. You try to read all these podcasts, and I tell them I work in media, and then if they get more into it, I explain I got a podcast or whatever. But I never looked at myself really like I would never label myself a journalist. But when I started doing the newsletter, I mean, very quickly I realized, well, I got to kind of be a journalist. And I'd never gone to school. And so what I did was I taught myself how to be a journalist. And, that involved reading a lot of books and learning a lot from Dave, who actually is a journalist. He actually got a degree. So, he's taught me a lot, and I've learned a lot on the fly. And I also, try to learn a lot from criticism of what I do and others do. People, they'll go, I'd have to have an example, but I mean, people are very critical of things. And, sometimes when people are critical, it's like you jump to the defense immediately, especially on the internet. And, I've always felt that, there's 2 types of criticism. There's a type of criticism where these people don't know what they're talking about, in which case you should probably just ignore it. And then there's a type of criticism where, they're right. And so, I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. I've screwed up a lot of things. But instead of getting angry about it, I do try to learn from it and see like, okay, what did I do? What should I have done in that situation? And so I guess I sort of feel like a journalist now. I try to do journalism the best I can, which in wrestling is very hard, but I do try.
Do you feel like, when you say there's a lot of noise, like anybody who's in the public like yourself, and this is true for wrestlers too, there's so much noise and criticism in the noise. Do you find it difficult to break out what is valid versus what is kind of bullshit? Or is that something that's gotten easier over time? How do you approach that?
Well, I can't say that I'm always right, obviously, because, anytime someone writes something on the internet, it's like all you're reading is these words. And you can't see the person who wrote it. You don't know what they look like. You don't know, how they would have said the words. It's just words. But I do feel that I can usually start reading and pretty quickly figure out, is this in good faith or not? And, a lot of it, I mean, if you look at my Twitter mentions, most of it is not good faith. If you go on our board, I would say that I think the majority of it is good faith. And I think that you can really easily sometimes I can see a username and it's like, I'm not going to read this one. Even if it isn't good faith, you lost your a long time ago. So
Yeah.
I do kind of feel, and also a lot of it is just inside. Like I can read criticism and I feel like a lot of times I can say, you know what, that is right. That they are correct, even if I don't like them. Like they're right about that. And but the one that's really the hardest is to deal with is criticism where they're wrong, but they're not trolling. They just don't understand. And sometimes when people get angry about something and they don't understand the circumstances, and for certain reasons, I can't really explain the circumstances for various reasons. That's what's hardest because then they get mad, like, why are you not saying what you? It's like I can't. So that's the hardest, really.
So you mentioned the kind of development of the internet kind of thing there. You've been doing this a long time now. You've seen a lot of changes in kind of wrestling media. How has your coverage changed during the time that you've been doing it?
How much of my coverage has changed?
Oh, just yeah. And how have you been able to adapt to kind of the new mediums or new outlets in terms of even something like the internet or YouTube or anything like that?
Well, I think the most difficult thing is finding out like how do you sustain, a business model that is completely changed. I mean, before, when everyone just got print newsletters, it's like it was all about scoops, really. I mean, if you look at a lot of the very, very early observers, I mean, Dave wasn't really known for his bios and history pieces really until later. It was a lot of news, like you'd get results of what was happening in a different territory that you didn't know about. You would get, this is why such and such angle happened. It was all about news. And I think the big thing nowadays is, people get all hung up on, who broke the story and breaking news and everything like that. And I mean, to me, I don't think you can really sustain on breaking news because on the internet, it's like as soon as you break a story, it's everywhere. Like it's everywhere. And, to me, one of the big strengths of the site and what I think is kind of the way we need to focus is, if let's say I found out that Tony Khan fell down and broke his leg. Someone text me right now.
I'm gonna get aggregated now.
I mean, okay, I send it to the front page. They do subscriber exclusive, Tony Khan breaks leg, but then you already spoiled it in there in the headline. Or, I put it up on my subscriber Twitter, I heard Tony Khan broke his leg. It's all over the internet 10 seconds later. It's like, what have I really accomplished with that scoop, really? That I was first? Like the thing, what's going to get people to pay for this content? I feel that it's now less about what are the scoops and more about, okay, Sika died. Dave's got 10,000 words on Sika. Okay, that's not something that's just going to be on the internet. The story that Sika died is on the internet 10 seconds later. But, who's going to give you the best bio of Sika? Well, that's going to be Dave. And then, there's a Dynamite show. Get the Dynamite results anywhere. You can watch it yourself. But, what can I tell you about my thoughts on the Dynamite show? Can I tell you about why I think something was a good decision, a bad decision? I mean, NXT with Javon, I just think it's so stupid. And I don't feel like people get why it's stupid. So, like, I can spend some time on that on a podcast. And I feel like if like wrestling journalism is going to survive, I mean, it's got to kind of be sort of like you're really paying for the long form journalism, the podcast of the journalism, less so, hey, here's the scoop. We had it first. Who cares? It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, this is, this is part of the changing landscape. Like you said, the internet means that everyone has these things immediately, and that there's this kind of constant news drive. There's this constant need for scoops. There's this constant, like you said, if it's scoops based, then you have to be providing them constantly. And that becomes sort of increasingly difficult, especially, I think we've seen, more of a lockdown on stuff in the last year or so. Is that something that, has affected your business as you've figured this out? Like, how are you, I know you talked about offering more analysis. Do you anticipate changing your business model more moving forward? Are you constantly thinking about this? Or is this something that you're kind of like, all right, this is my goal for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, I think that long term, who knows long term? I mean, I have absolutely no earthly idea. I mean, I don't know if people will just stop reading altogether, or they don't want to listen to podcasts anymore, or, I mean, to me, it's like I am always looking for the scoops, but it's not even so much like, okay, well, here's a scoop, so and so might be on the pay-per-view tomorrow. Okay, well, that's whatever. But there's so many stories. Like I always read on the internet, like, oh, who are the guys that really break the scoops? Well, it's Fightful and Mike Johnson and I never see my name. And like I don't really get mad about it because I don't care, because I'm not really in it for scoops. But if you actually listen to the shows, like there's so much stuff that I talk about on the shows that are really scoops. But because they're not presented in such a way, I think that they're sort of the work that I do to try to figure out what's going on everywhere is very much overlooked, which again, I'm fine with it. It's just kind of funny. But like I feel like I've done a really good job in explaining a lot of the stuff that's been going on with AEW over the last couple of years. And there is so much to talk about. There's so much I have talked about, and I don't really know why. I don't know if I should say it's not acknowledged or whatever, but I mean, I feel like I've broken more in the last 2 years than I probably ever have in my life. And, because it's not disseminated in a certain way, I feel like people feel like, well, there really are no scoops. He's just talking about what he thinks about the shows. I think part of that is because the clips that end up on the internet, on YouTube, are usually some rant I did about something on a show. And you kind of get this reputation, even though I do a lot more than rant about stupid things on shows.
A lot of this is driven by the explosion in kind of aggregation. And when they do aggregate, it's very much selective. So, for example, like Wade Keller at The Torch never gets aggregated for anything that he does either. But sometimes when they aggregate, especially your audio, they miss kind of some really important things like tone. I think we've talked about being kind of Dave translators where we spotted things just off his tone alone. But it also sets the table for news. And if there's a correction, that never gets enough coverage afterwards.
I'll give you a good example. I don't want to interrupt, but I mean,
No,
a great
you're good.
example is, so on Raw Monday, like Pat McAfee's not there, okay? And Michael Cole says, Pat McAfee's not here tonight, but don't read anything into it. And earlier in the day, they'd had the Pat McAfee show, and they'd had the Wyatts. The Wyatt Six had done some cut-in or whatever. And then, the package that showed up for Pat McAfee was addressed to Pat McAfee. And the way that Michael Cole said it, maybe I said it in a way that was like, this is what happened. But I thought I made it clear that this seems to be an angle. I mean, they've been doing an angle with Pat McAfee and the Wyatt Six. And then the way that Michael Cole explained it, I mean, it totally came off as an angle. So, the next day it turns out that Pat McAfee's father-in-law passed away. So then, of course, everybody puts out the clip of us talking about how, it appears to be an angle, and then, oh, they're wrong, and et cetera, and I'm sure there'll be no correction. So on Observer Live, I mean, the first thing I did on the show is I explained, okay, Pat McAfee's father passed away, and this is what happened last night. This is why I thought it was an angle, et cetera, et cetera. And that clip ended up nowhere. Like, nobody acknowledged the fact that we talked about it afterwards. And this happens all the time. Like, people will go back and find, oh boy, got him there. And then when there is a correction or et cetera, I mean, that never goes out. So it is kind of difficult in that way because, there is probably a large proportion of the internet audience that are like, yeah, these guys, they make mistakes all the time and they never offer corrections. They're terrible journalists, which is what happens when only bits and pieces of everything go out.
Well, I think that's kind of a challenge with audio versus print. Print's so easy to read and something you can, access so quickly and can share quickly. Whereas I feel with audio, there's a context to it. And I feel like, especially, for audio where, like Trish said, tone is so important, you kind of have to get to know the person you're listening to so you can pick up on some of that smaller stuff. Sure. It's definitely something that I feel like is unfair because I think, Trish and I've seen that happen a few times and we've talked about it in terms of like what people choose to get annoyed about versus what they don't choose to get annoyed about. I think it's definitely something that's confused us because that kind of stuff, like to me, I don't know.
So the Observer actually cut back on running kind of Twitter clips. Was that a choice made because of the way that people were reacting to them or pulling them into different contexts?
I will be perfectly honest and tell you I have no idea. I mean, when I first started doing, audio, I was a big fan of Art Bell. And one of the things I thought was so cool besides his show was the fact that he did the entire thing by himself. And so he did it from his house and he took all the calls. He ran the board, like he did everything, which like nobody does in radio. And so when I started, it was like, I'm going to do the same thing. And, even though we do byline and they've got a call screener and they could take the calls there, like I did all the calls myself. Like I always was like, I'm controlling all of this. And there was a period, actually quite a while ago, where I realized, what am I doing? This is ridiculous. And, what I need to do, especially when we expanded, it's like, I know there's stuff I'm good at. I know there's stuff I'm not good at. Anything like when people get mad at me about something on the website, like, dude, I have nothing to do with that. Someone gets mad at me about some of the boards doing, I got nothing to do with that. I don't like put the clips on YouTube. I don't choose the headlines. I don't put the clips up on Twitter. Like as far as his video setup here, I didn't do anything. I couldn't tell you what that camera is right there. I couldn't tell you like what this big light here is. I don't know anything about it. So yeah, I'm not sure why we don't have the clips on Twitter anymore. Like one day I found out that we had like a what do you call it? This thing the kids use, the quick, not Vine, what's the other one?
TikTok.
It's like one day we had a TikTok. And they're like, TikTok. My mom's like, I'm following you on TikTok. I was like, what? And all these clips are on TikTok. And then, one day someone just brought up, how come you're not on TikTok anymore? I was like, we're not? And I go up and there like been no new TikTok videos for like 2 months or something. And so I had no idea. So I talked to them. I think they're back now. I probably should know more, but my brain has limited capacity.
So is there a tension between trying to grow a business and providing good coverage and good wrestling journalism? And if there is, how do you handle that?
Well, all I have ever done is just concentrate on doing a good job with the business. Somebody used, and I've seen it more and more, so I guess it's like a new term, but I'm old. Now somebody on the board, I can't even do it. I can't even say what they really said, but it was like something like, they said a certain thing for the aggregation or whatever. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I have never done a rant, reviewed something, anything with the idea that, well, this one is going to go viral or, this one's going to do good numbers on YouTube. If anything, it's like, it's funny. I will, like when the Wyatt 6 debuted, I was on the Twitch chat and, I was getting ready to do the review show the next day. And like, as soon as the chat opens, everyone's like, oh my God, we're going to get a good one today. Man, he's just going to go nuts on the Wyatt 6. Guy had a giant mallet. They're all excited. And I was just like, man, I'm just going to let everybody down here because I wasn't mad about it. So I can't like false, anger, fury, make up a rant, whatever. It's like, I don't know what's going to come out. I don't know what I'm going to get mad about and what I'm not. I don't put them up on YouTube. I mean, there is zero, I got to grow the business, so I got to really get after. Like people go, the best way to try to get, listenership is bury AW and bury Dave. Like it's a conscious business decision. I have never, not once ever, done anything like that. Because I can't. It would not be, like I can't do an hour or 2 hours or whatever being totally full of it. I mean, it has to be genuine. Otherwise, I'm like, I don't play a character. Like I got a friend that works in NXT and I get so mad about that Javon thing. And he goes, "You're being a gimmick." Like he doesn't believe I'm sincere. Like he thinks I'm being a gimmick about it, and I'm not. It's just, that's how I feel. So no, I don't go out of my way to, try to build the business through, certain rants or whatever. I figure if we do a good job, that's what's going to help build the business. So I try to do a good job. I don't always screw up a lot, actually, but I try.
There's been a real distinct focus on wrestling media this year. When it comes from things like the co-opted journalism stuff with the Fast Nationals, or even coverage of the Janelle Grant case, which, is a very challenging thing to cover. How difficult do you find covering stories like that?
The Vince McMahon Janelle Grant thing has just been like the bane of my existence, because how I feel, my role is to be like a journalist. I know that, in this situation, let me put it this way, okay? There's certain things that I do, when we reviewed Nitro, I mean, it's like we're reviewing an old show, it sucks, bury it or whatever, have some fun. I do a lot of jokes here and there, but like this is a real serious, important story. And it's not something to joke about. This is not something to do, like why didn't Bryan rant about Janelle Grant like he ranted about Hell in a Cell 2019 with the mallet? It's like, that's just, it's confuses me when I get that reaction. I feel that my job on a really serious story is to do the best I can to cover it in a journalistic manner. And I feel that in that particular case, there is so much dislike for Vince McMahon that people have decided, and believe me, I am no fan of Vince McMahon. They have decided that, well, he's guilty. And so everything that comes out about this case, they fit to their decision that they have made that he's guilty. And to me, it's like, obviously he wrote the text messages. I mean, there's a lot about this case that, I mean, it's pretty clear it's factual, but there's a lot of things that we don't know. And to me, it would actually do a disservice to make like declarations about things that we actually don't know. Like there's so much stuff that we do know that like, that's my job, to talk about what we do know and not rant and rave and, try Vince McMahon. I'm not the judge. I'm not the jury. I'm not the executioner. I'm just trying to tell you, like, this is what's happening in the story. And it's made people very, very angry. I've had a lot of people very angry that you're not going harder on Vince. You're not going harder on Triple H. It's like, well, I mean, we don't know anything about Triple H. I mean, all these presumptions, he must have known. He must have this. Maybe he did, but also maybe he didn't. We don't know. And I've tried very hard to just like right down the middle. This is what we know. This is what we don't know. And, that's it. Like, that's all I know. So that's how I'm trying to report on the story. And I've had people very upset. We've had people quit. They want something that they're not going to get, at least from me. So it's just, I don't know any other way to cover it than to just try to explain what we know and what we don't know.
Is this something that, as you've gotten the feedback, and you talked earlier about getting feedback, is this something that as you've gotten feedback and people have been frustrated, and I think, you've talked about employees and listeners, other people, have you considered hey, do I need to change my approach about this? Are you worried about the impact of the choices you make in covering this on your business and your subscriber base? Or is this something that you're, like you said, you're just kind of, I have to do what I have to do?
Well, I mean, there's always the thought about, how does this affect? I don't want people to quit, et cetera. But at the same time, it's like, I have to do what the job is. And, if you have decided that Triple H knew about everything and he's guilty, I mean, yeah, maybe I'll make some people happy by saying that I believe that or it's true or whatever. But I mean, I don't know that. I don't know if that's true. I don't know anything. And so I can't do that. Like, even if people are going to leave over it, like, I can't do that. I don't know. And I feel that that's the responsible thing to do. Even if people want something different, it's like, I don't know. I mean, that's it. I'm trying to do the right thing by, you know.
Is this sort of like a conflict struggle in the fact that, I don't, you're someone who does, as you said, get scoops, but you're not necessarily doing, investigative journalism, like the Wall Street Journal or somebody else would do on a case like this?
Well, I have not done as well as other people have done in terms of the investigative journalism. Some people have devoted their whole, this is what they're doing. This is like their beat. And I think that part of the issue is I can't really make it my beat because I've got so many things that I want to cover and that the readership is expecting me to cover. The idea that I will some people want me to not talk about WWE. Like, you cannot talk about WWE, or we don't want to hear anything positive about WWE because of all this negativity involved. And it's like, I mean, I can't do that. Like, if they have a good pay-per-view, it was a good pay-per-view. I mean, if I thought it was good, it was good. I can't, every show, don't talk about any news except what's the latest on Vince McMahon and Janelle Grant. I mean, when there's news, we'll talk about it. And, when there's a down period, like there is right now, then I do have to cover all of the other stuff. So I don't have the resources to only focus on that. And, some people have done a great job, focusing on that. And, I've talked about what they've found and et cetera. But, I can't add anything that I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also there's this other thing where I think some people think that I know more than I do. Just because I've been covering it forever, there's well, he has to know that Triple H. I don't have any idea. And I think there's that, well, you must have heard something or whatever. And, I haven't. And, really, I just haven't. I mean, I'm not hiding anything.
I think there is a frustration amongst a section of the fan base, and this probably goes inside the industry at times as well, that kind of cases like this haven't led to kind of a discussion on the culture of wrestling or how it can be improved. And we have seen a series of stories kind of that have covered abuses of power to a varying degree in recent years. How do you view the current culture of pro wrestling?
Well, it's Vince's issues. I mean, they date back a long time. I mean, as far as we know, at least the mid '80s, and probably even before that. But again, I don't know, other than what we know from Rita Chatterton and on, and I started wrestling on the indies in 1998, and I was pretty much done in 2010. And then, me and Filthy started going back. It's probably about 2017, 2018, I think it was. And what I know is that the culture that I saw in 1998 compared to the culture that I saw in 2018 was so night and day. It was so night and day. And I'm not saying that in 2018 there weren't, because obviously there were, people that unsavory characters, etc. But, in general, it's like in 1998, I didn't want to leave my bag anywhere. I didn't trust anybody in the locker room except maybe Vinny. Nobody. My best friend Buddy would have cut up my trunks and I didn't trust anybody. And then, I did a couple of shows in 2018 and it was like, I can leave my bag and my wallet in the back and go out and come back and not worry about it. And I think that people don't want to believe that things are so much better now than they have been in the past. And I think that part of this is that, in the Janelle Grant lawsuit, it was like Vince McMahon, John Laurinaitis, and the WWE. And so, there are a lot of people that they don't like Vince McMahon. They don't like John Laurinaitis. They don't like WWE. And so, I keep saying it's all of WWE. It's not just Vince. It's not just Laurinaitis. It's all of WWE. And that to me is another one of those things where it's not all of WWE. It's not. There's so many good people working there that have never done anything in their lives. And I shouldn't say never done anything, but you know what I'm saying? Like they've never been involved in something like this. And, they didn't know about it. They didn't know about it to this degree. I mean, with Vince McMahon, it's like, yes, everybody knew that he was unfaithful to Linda. Like everybody knew that. And, I'm sure that there were people that figured out something's going on with this Vince and Janelle Grant. But, people are insistent, some people, that everybody knew everything that she is accusing him of, and they helped cover it up. And it permeates the entire company. And do I believe that there is nobody in that company that should be out right now? I don't have any proof of anything, but I don't believe it. I believe there are probably some people there still who should be gone. I don't believe it is completely cleaned up. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and say, man, thank God, I won't even say a person's name. Thank God so-and-so is hurt because, God, they're just part of the problem. I'm probably not part of the problem. And I think that the wrestling business as a whole today is probably in many ways the best it's ever been. I'm not saying it's necessarily good or great compared to a normal, but I don't know, But, based on things that have happened in the past, I mean, we have made gigantic steps across all wrestling companies with the health of the performers and taking care of people and, attempting to weed out problems. Is it perfect? No. But, I think it is a lot better now. And I think one of the big catalysts actually was Chris Benoit when he murdered his family. I mean, you can look at, was WWE perfect afterwards? Absolutely not. There were a lot of horrible things going on. But, if you look at the way that they treated their performers and other human beings before and after Benoit, I mean, there were positive changes made. And, that does trickle down. And I saw it in 2018 when I went in those locker rooms and I was like, these are actually some nice people that are working here. These are some nice, genuine people who are trying to go out and have a good show for fans, and they want to give them their money's worth. And I did not feel like that in 1998 at all.
Switching gears a little bit, obviously we're in about 5 years since AEW has come along, and obviously with Vince McMahon, out of the picture and coming back and out of the picture again.
Actually, can I interrupt you real quick? What do you guys think of the coverage so far?
Damn it.
No, tell me, because I want to know.
I've said this to you elsewhere, but I think that the coverage improved as it went on. I think you did listen to a lot of the feedback in terms of the amount of detail that people really wanted to see when news events did happen. And, we gave you that feedback. I think it's difficult. It's a difficult balance. And there is a tendency to rush to certain conclusions. I agree with that. But I do think there is an element of wanting kind of wrestling as a workplace to be more on the level of other workplaces that have had to adapt quite quickly and also have a hierarchy. So both Sarah and myself work in very male-dominated industries where this is a thing. And, even when I speak to people that do work in the industry, it's still a case of where that hierarchy can sometimes prevent progress, is how they feel.
I think, like Trish said, I think the coverage has gotten better. And I do think one of the things I appreciate the most, is that you and Dave also are people who are willing to like, hey, here's my board, here's my listeners, let me hear the criticism and take it into account. I do think there's maybe more of a happy medium between I don't know if this is going on and I just can tell you a fact. I think there's maybe some more conversations about culture and stuff like that. And I think one of the challenges as you get older, and I'm speaking of myself significantly here, not just you, is that you see how much progress there has been. And you're like, hey, shouldn't you be happy? There's been so much progress, without realizing that there's younger people who are like, it still sucks. Like, we'd like it to be better than it is.
I think that's absolutely part of this, because I have, it's not just like I covered it or I saw it. Like, no, I was not in WWE. No, I am not in AEW. No, I was not in WCW TNA. But I was in the business. I did shows. I ran across these people. I mean, I have been in many locker rooms, and to me, it's like I was in locker rooms in 2 generations. And if you were only in a locker room in this generation, then yeah, I bet you probably do see things a lot differently than I do. Because, I would go back and wrestle today. I wasn't afraid of killing myself. But like, if you said, hey, I can give you a time machine, you can go back and wrestle in 98 again. It's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to deal with those people. I didn't like those people. Like, I have a lot of bitterness towards a lot of things during that period, not just involving me, but involving other people. I mean, it was a bad, bad period. And, and covering it as well. I mean, the days of under 40 deaths, I mean, that used to be, I mean, I remember I would wake up every day. I'd tell my wife, I'd go, I got to see if anybody died today. Wasn't even like a joke. It was like, okay, who died today? And, having lived through all of that and then seeing where we are today, it's like, it has come so far. And we are in a time where Vince McMahon is not involved in this business at all. I mean, he is completely, totally out. And are there other people from that era that are still working in this business? Yes. Should all of them be? Like I said, I'm skeptical about some of them. I won't mention one name. I just don't want to mention this name. But it is a name that people are like, he had to know. He's got to know and help. And like, I don't think I've ever said one nice thing about this person ever. But I still can't say I think he knew, because I don't. But there are people who I don't know, but I strongly think this business would be a better place if they weren't in it. But I don't have anything that would bring them down. So no, it's not perfect, but yes, I do see it from the perspective of, yeah, it's so much better now.
I think the other difficulty with this is that we're in a period with increased tribalism amongst the fan base, and that's kind of reflected in society as well. We see people more gravitate to a side and kind of an echo chamber. But this has also led to kind of a want to give yourself your own media and distrust in the larger media. And this also plays into journalists of established sites, papers being kind of targeted, and it's wrestling has always been a kind of secret society in some ways. The relationship between journalists and wrestlers has not always been strong. Dirt sheets is a term for that, but this seems to have increased in recent years. It feels like you were targeted quite heavily last year, and how does that affect
which one? Which time?
I
can't even tell you which one you're talking about.
Okay, so the one that we were referring to would be the Dax Harwood thing, and because that's probably the one that had the most coverage.
Yes.
How difficult is that to deal with in this kind of age of tribalism, and how much does it affect your business?
I couldn't tell you how it affects business, but I mean,
Okay.
tribalism is the worst. I mean, it is just the worst because it makes everything, I mean, just it's hard to even attempt to be fair when you're dealing with tribalism on both sides.
Mm.
I mean, I feel like I still get this, paid by Tony Khan thing. And it's
I've
funny
seen the
'cause, like,
receipt.
if you listen to the shows, like, I'm so much more bullish on WWE than AEW. And by the way, being bullish on WWE now, also, it's the same deal. The tribalism, the anti-WWE, it's like, oh my God, how does he like this or that? It's like, I'm trying to tell you honestly what I think. What I think about how WWE has been, Raw, SmackDown, how I think Dynamite and Collision, the positives, the negatives. I try to be, I don't even like the word fair. I'm not even trying to be, the word I'm looking for is like honest. I'm just trying to tell you what I really think about everything. And no matter what my honest thought is, whatever side you're on in this tribalism, it's like, oh, well, it's, he's paid by Tony Khan or, whatever. It's just, it's so hard. I don't understand. It's funny because like wrestling fans, I always see those people that go, you should just like all wrestling. And it's like, you're actually the worst. You people are the worst. It's not that we should like all wrestling. It's like, we should like good wrestling and we should dislike bad wrestling. And it doesn't matter what company it's in. What is it? Is it good or is it bad? I don't know.
So you have a lot of contacts across wrestling, and we're nowhere near that level. But something that we often struggle with is when we are kind of told things that are kind of going on, that it can influence how you see the product on screen. Is
Well,
that something that you have to contend with, or something that you think influences your coverage at times?
Well, it's funny because I don't remember what I was mad about, but I said something, and then this big long thread started on the board, and it's like nobody understood what I was talking about, and it was getting very, very clear to me. And so finally, I wrote this long paragraph, and I just explained like everything that was going on that made me upset about it. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, I did not know that. Why have you never said that before? Wow. And it just totally blew my mind because I felt like I'd been saying this stuff for months. And it was like, did I not say it? Was it just something I'd been told that I was just baffled that I wrote all of this, which I thought was such common knowledge based on reviews of the shows I'd done, etc. But it was like everybody was hearing it for the first time. So yeah, I do hear, I hear stuff every single day throughout the day. And I don't want to say it influences so much what I think about the show, but it certainly gives me a much better understanding of why things happened on the show. People's frustrations. I feel that that's more what I get out of this knowledge as opposed to like, okay, well, I heard this, so now I look at the show differently. I don't know what I'm really trying to say other than it does make me look at the shows completely differently, but I don't think it so much influences my thought on a show, if that makes sense.
Okay. Do you want to go? I'll go.
You go. I'm
You're all good. So we've seen a real kind of increase in content creators in recent years, and whilst that that diversifies the offering, there's kind of a weird juxtaposition between kind of TikTok news, as you talked about earlier, kind of scoops and being there first, and kind of deep dives, data and analysis, which is was kind of what we focus on. You've recently announced a price increase for the Observer. What do you think your unique selling points are that will keep the audience with you with this? And is there anything you're looking to do to diversify your offering going forward?
Well, I hope I don't get in trouble by talking about one. The fact of the matter is, it was a very painful decision to raise the price. But when we started the site in 2005, it was $5.99. And over the years, we raised the price every 4 or 5 years or whatever. And what we did was not increase the price for current subscribers. So if you were paying $5.99 in 2005, it is now 2024, and you're still paying $5.99. And the issue is that at the time, it felt like this is the right thing to do. We're going to be, to our subscribers, we're raising the price for new people, but like we're going to keep you at this. And I always like to look long term, but I never thought in 2024, this guy's going to be paying $5.99 a month. And if you look at everyone's like, well, it's not that much to run a website. Well, actually, you could say that about certain websites, but
Mhm.
I mean, there's our bills for this website, whether it be paying hosts, paying the writers, and I don't even know everything that goes into the back end. That's not my deal, but we can't afford to have people be paying $5.99, and it sucks. So we had to make the decision. Okay, well, we've got to raise it. We're going to raise the actual price was $12.99, so we raised it $2, and I don't think we've raised the price in 4 or 5 years. So we raised it $2, but for a lot of people, it's like, well, for me, it got raised $5 because I was paying $9.99. So a lot of people are upset, and I don't like to see that, but it's I don't want to say oh, we would have gone out of business if we didn't raise prices, but with each passing year, it gets more and more difficult, and I don't want to be laying off people. I don't want people to hey, we can't pay you anymore. I want people to be able to get paid. I want this thing to work. And when we made the announcement, our big mistake was saying, I can't remember what it said in the email, but it was something like, "We'll bring you further enhancements" or whatever. And everybody jumped on "Well, what are they?" Well, the reason I have not said what the enhancements are is because some of them are a ways down the road. And it's not a situation where, well, we can create this new board and then raise prices. It's like we got a lot of things, and a lot of it is not even stuff that people will notice, but we have some back end technology that we've been using since 2005, and we can't use it anymore. And in order to move into 2024, I mean, we're talking a significant outlay of cash. And it's not something that we can do without a price increase. Now, everybody afterwards, I read every single comment in that thread from people upset. And, there were some obviously that were not in good faith, but there were a lot that were in good faith. And so, a lot of people were saying, well, what about, tiers? What about this? What about that? So, and then we had a big thing about, hey, what about Apple Podcasts? You can't do Apple Podcasts. I wish I could get them on Apple Podcasts, et cetera. So what we are planning, at least at this point, is instead of having tiers on the website, the main site is $14.99, and it'll be, the website, the archives of the radio shows, archives of the newsletters, et cetera. And then the video site, if you only want the video podcast, $9.99 on YouTube. And we are also going to open up Apple Podcast subscriptions for the podcasts. And so if you only want the podcasts, if you only listen to the shows, you don't care about anything else, $9.99 a month, or you can do $99 for a year. And so you'll be getting it for $8. You can get all the podcasts or whatever. So that thing just came about because of, what people were upset about. So we can't just, if you're a subscriber to the main site, the way that Apple protects their podcast, we can't just allow you to use the Apple Podcast app because it's ridiculously simple to pirate all those shows. So we're going to open up a different option If people really want to use Apple Podcasts and that's all they care about is a podcast, they'll have that option and it'll be significantly cheaper than the main site. But it's all, like, I know people think, it's all about greed. It's all about whatever. I mean, it's not. We're doing our best. We want this thing to survive. We want people who are making, a living to be able to continue making a living, not lay people off. It sucks, but I mean, it had to be done.
A couple more just before you go, because we know you're always time pressure. You're just as busy as my schedule, unfortunately. So in terms of wrestling media going forward, how do you see the future?
I don't know, but I will be perfectly honest with that. I just don't know. I mean, wrestling is here for the foreseeable future, and WWE is not going anywhere. I expect AEW to get, a solid deal, and they're not going anywhere. And, it's very popular now amongst, particularly TNA with the sickos or whatever Tony calls them. They're very passionate and loyal. And, WWE is legitimately in the middle of a boom period. This is their third major boom period, the Hulkamania, Attitude Era, and now this one. And so, there's no danger of wrestling going away. And so, the big question is, well, how do we navigate? What do people want? What do people want? I mean, a lot of younger viewers are not into the idea of, hey, I should be paying for my podcast. Hey, I should be paying for this news. I should be paying for a board. Although I have heard people say all of a sudden that the board is like a great value because the rest of social media is so horrible. Like they actually would pay for just the board, which nobody has ever said before. But yeah, it's going to be, I mean, my thought is, yeah, there may be a lot of people that don't want to start becoming Observer subscribers. They just don't want to read 40,000 words every week. But there always will be people who will love that. There will always be people that will love listening to podcasts and listening to people talk about wrestling. And really our job is to, not, have great content for aggregation or whatever. But to me, it's about, let's just do the best we can. The best we can. If there's going to be, wrestling journalism, let's do it the best we can and hope that even 10 years from now, even if it's a small number of people paying $99 a month, there are people that will support some wrestling journalism. So I can't tell you what's going to happen tomorrow, much less 5 years from now.
You've been doing this for a long time. Do you still have fun? Is it still fun?
Well, it depends on the day. Yes, I still really enjoy doing this. Obviously, it's like any job. Every time, sometimes I get angry or frustrated about something, and people are like, "You're covering wrestling and making money. Like, how could anything be?" It's like any job. The people that yell about that, it's like, well, what's your job? Whatever it is, somebody wishes they had your job. It's just the way it is. You get frustrated about something at your job. There's probably somebody else goes, I'd do anything for that job. It's like, it's a job. There's cool things. There's things that aren't so cool. There's, positives, negatives. And, I mostly enjoy it. There's times when it gets frustrating, get angry, but in general, I'm very grateful to be doing it.
Do it. You're laughing at me.
All right. So this is our silly final question that we're going to throw at you. And this is something that comes at us from our sister podcast, Tunnel Talk, where they talk about this all the time. If you're not familiar with the concept of your special guy, it's your wrestler, and it could be a man or a woman who you are sort of mildly irrational about. I'll use... You do?
No, go
okay.
ahead. Everyone has one, but go ahead. Who's yours?
Who's mine? Oh, mine is Chuck Taylor. He should have a half an hour television every week. I understand that it wouldn't be a huge rating draw, but it would be absolutely, I would literally watch a half an hour of that man watching the Sixers. Do you have a special person, Guy? And who is that person, if you feel comfortable sharing that with us?
Amazingly, I've asked a million people this question, and I've never thought about it. But usually the question is like, everybody seems to have some total rando that got him into wrestling. It's never like, oh, I was a real big fan of the Macho Man. So he's like, well, that Sika. I mentioned Sika because he just passed away, but like of all of the wrestlers in the 80s, like Sika was the one, with Kamala that got you into wrestling. But I wish you would have told me this question before. Because really, I don't have one. I mean, and you know what? It's funny if I did, it changes on a regular basis. Like if you ask me today, the name that would pop into my head is Mark Briscoe. And that could change next week. But Mark Briscoe, like, no matter what's going on in my day, I can think of a Mark Briscoe promo, and I've got a giant smile on my face. And I love the guy, so he'll be my answer.
That's a really, really good one.
Perfect.
Well, Bryan, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed the discussion as much as we have. Is there anything else you want to add just before you go? Anything you want to plug?
No, not really. WrestlingObserver.com. I think everyone hopefully knows that one. If not, that's a good website, I hear. And after this thing goes up and everybody gets mad about it, maybe we can do a follow-up and I can address all that.
Anytime. You're welcome anytime you want to stop by and air any happiness or grievances.
With me. Thank you.
Thank you for putting up with us. All right.
All right. So this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast today with the wonderful Bryan Alvarez. We are part of the Social Suplex Network. You can find all their great podcasts on their website. Please listen to all our sister pod and brother podcasts. We say sister and brother?
Yeah, I think
Sister and brother. Sister and brother podcast. You can also join the Social Suplex Discord where you can ask any questions you wish. Abuse me for my support of Tetsuya Naito, seeing as a Forbidden Door weekend, because that is my special little guy, as everyone is aware. And you can also contact us by email at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. Also find us on Twitter at trishandsarah. And we will be back shortly after Forbidden Door with some follow-up content. So you are, unfortunately, putting up with us 3 times in 1 week. What in the world is happening? So until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. Thank you for listening.